much happened since you've been gone. The setting is back in the early part of the 1900s in North Carolina, North Carolina. In that period, many of the, or a number of financiers and businessmen would come south. Land was cheap. They'd buy large tracts of land and build big mansions on it. That's where Biltmore Estates come from, and you've ever been over there. And so this is what had happened. This fellow had come down to New York and bought a large tract of land and built a big house on it. He and his wife. He was conducting his business from down there. His wife wasn't too happy about leaving New York. So she would go back a couple of times a year, spend 3 or 4 weeks, and see all of her friends and have parties and buy a wardrobe for the next season and so forth. So she'd been off on one of these forays, and she was coming back, and she came back on the train, and the handyman met her at the train with her to get her luggage. And so old Fred met her there, and he put the stuff up, and they got into the car and started up to the place. And she said, "Well, Fred, what's been happening since I've been gone?" He said, "Ma'am, ain't nothing much happened since you've been gone." And she pressed him. She said, "Oh, surely something has happened since I've been gone. I've been gone almost a month. So you know something has happened since I've been gone." He said, "Well, ma'am, ain't too much happened since you've been gone, except, well, really, your little dog died." And she said, "Little Trixie died?" He said, "Yes, little Trixie died." She said, "Well, you know, little Trixie was in good health when I left. What happened to little Trixie?" And he said, "Well, ma'am, we don't really know for sure, but we think it was that old bad horse meat that she got into and ate, and it made her sick, and little Trixie just died. And we think that's what happened to her." And the lady said, "Well, what do you mean horse meat? Why would you have spoiled horse meat?" And he said, "Well, that's what happened when the stables burned down. The stables burned down, and before we could get the horses out, some of them burned up. Before we could get them cleaned up, you know, they spoiled, and little Trixie got out and ate some of that old dead horse meat, and she died, and we think that's probably what killed her, but ain't nothing much else happened since you've been gone." She said, "Well, how did the stables catch on fire?" She said, "Well, we're pretty sure it was sparks from the house when it burned down. See, man, the house burned down, and the sparks blew over onto the stables, caught the stables on fire, and burned up some of those horses before we could get them out. And before we could get them cleaned up, the horses spoiled, and old meat spoiled, and little Trixie got out and ate some of it, and got sick and died, and we think that's what killed her, but ain't nothing much else happened since you've been gone." She said, "Well, how did the house catch on fire?" He said, "Well, we think it was from the candles." He said, "We had candles there in the living room, and the windows were open, and we think it blew the curtains over the candles and caught the curtains on fire, and the curtains caught the house on fire, and sparks from the house went over and caught the stable on fire. And before we get all the horses out, burned some of the horses up, and then before we clean them up, the horses spoiled, and, you know, little Trixie got out and ate some of that old dead horse meat, and got sick, and we think that's probably what killed her, but ain't nothing much else happened since you've been gone." She said, "Well, what were candles doing? Why did you have candles in the living room?" And he said, "Well, we had some at the head of the coffin that was there in the living room. Yes, there was a coffin there, and we had the candles there, and the windows were open, and we think that the wind blew the curtains over the candles and caught the curtains on fire, and caught the house on fire, sparks went over, caught the stables on fire, and burned up some of those old horses before we could get them out. They spoiled, and little Trixie got out and ate some old dead horse flesh and got sick, and we're pretty sure that's what killed her, but ain't nothing much really happened since you've been gone." And she said, "Well, who died? You know, what happened? Who died?" He said, "Well, your husband died, ma'am. He died, and we had him laid out there in the living room, had candles at the head of the coffin, and the windows open, and the wind blew the curtains over the candles caught the curtains on fire, and the curtains caught the house on fire, and the house caught the stables on fire, and burned up those horses, and well, you kind of know the rest of it, but, you know, ain't nothing much else happened since you've been gone. She said, my goodness, said, what happened to my husband? What was it, a heart attack? Said, he's got a bad heart. Was it a heart attack? And he said, yes. And said, we think it was. The doctor thinks it was a heart attack. Said it was a heart attack. And he died. And so we put him in the living room, had a coffin, put the candles at the head of the coffin, and the windows open, and the wind blew the curtains over the candles and caught the curtains on fire, and the curtains caught the house on fire. And the sparks blew over and caught the stable on fire, and they burned up some of those horses, and the old meat just rotted, to tell you the truth. And little Trixie got out and ate some of it and got sick, and we're pretty sure that's what killed her, but really ain't nothing much happened since she'd been gone. And she said, well, our husband, did he exert himself? He's not supposed to exert himself. I bet he exerted himself. And he said, yes, and the doctor said he exerted himself. He exerted himself too much and had a heart attack and died. When he died, we put him in the living room in a coffin, put candles at the head, and the windows open, and the wind blew the curtains, and the curtains caught on fire, and caught the house on fire, and caught the stable on fire. And then burned up some of those horses, and the horses rotted, and little Trixie got in there and ate some of it and got sick, and we think that's what killed little Trixie, but ain't nothing much else happened since you've been gone. And she said, well, what did he do to exert himself? He's not supposed to be exerting himself. What did he do? I said, well, ma'am, said, what he was doing was, he was downtown in the Railroad Hotel in a room with his secretary at lunchtime, and the doctor said he exerted himself too much in there with his secretary, and so that's what happened. And he had a heart attack and died, and we put him in the living room, put candles at the head of the coffin, and opened the windows, and the windows blew the curtains over the candles, caught the candles on fire, and the curtains caught the house on fire, and sparks blew over and caught the stable on fire, and burned up some of those old horses. Before we get them taken away, well, they spoiled, and little Trixie got out, ate some of them, and got sick, and she died too. We think that's what killed her, but ain't nothing much else happened since she been gone. Hard to tell when that one ends, but that's ain't nothing much happened since you've been gone.